In today's video, we have some additional NHL trade rumors focusing on the Anaheim Ducks and the Carolina Hurricanes. Plus, we have some more movement on the NHL waiver wire. We'll discuss all that activity coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, today we have some trade rumors and some waiver wire action here to discuss. Now, first of all, let's jump into the waiver wire. That's a couple quick hits here. The Montreal Canadiens have placed defenseman Xavier Ouellet on waivers. So we'll find out as of noon Eastern time tomorrow whether or not he gets claimed. So with Shea Weber returning, we've discussed before how there's a little bit of a dynamic change with their defense core and that they very well might be looking to potentially acquire a defenseman to play alongside Weber. Right now, for the last few games at least, they've been using Brett Kulak and it hasn't been too bad. So they very well might ride that out a little bit longer before they decide to make a move. But as we've seen with the Montreal Canadiens here in the last few weeks or month or so, they've had a number of players put on the waiver wire, and most of them so far have been claimed, including Jacob Delarose as well as Sherbak as well not too long ago. So we'll see if anybody bites here on Xavier Ouellet or whether or not he'll go down to their minor league affiliate in Laval. But either way, he's on waivers, and we'll find out tomorrow at noon Eastern whether or not he's been claimed. Now, the other information today on the NHL waiver wire comes from the Washington Capitals and Russian forward Sergei Shumakov. Now, he had been playing down in Hershey in the American Hockey League, and he was placed on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination, and he did clear, which now makes him an unrestricted free agent, and he's free to sign with anybody. So Shumakov was part of the Washington organization playing in the American Hockey League. Things really weren't working out. I mean, he got into, I think it was around 10 games that had 3 or 4 points. Like, it wasn't too bad, but it wasn't exactly what he was looking for. So now he is free to sign with any other NHL teams should one decide to give him an opportunity. So keep an eye on Sergei Shumakov. Might be a player that we see snagged up here by another team in the short term. Now let's move on to today's NHL trade rumors. As I mentioned, they focus on mainly the Anaheim Ducks and the Carolina Hurricanes. And you know what? They might actually be two teams that very well might be able to help each other here with a trade. One's in the East, one's in the West, so that obviously that bodes well, as a lot of teams don't like to trade within their division or sometimes even within their conference. Once we kind of explain here what each are looking to do, you'll see that they very well could be a good help to each other, and they actually play each other tonight as well. So we'll see. They'll get a first-hand look at some of the players they might be considering being interested in here. But first of all, let's get started with Anaheim. So the speculation around the Anaheim Ducks right now is indicated that they're interested in maybe bringing in an additional defenseman, preferably somebody with a left shot. That might seem a little bit funny because they just traded away Marcus Pettersson for Daniel Sprong, but obviously you have to give up something to get something, and in that case they obviously really wanted Sprong, for their forward group, so they gave up Pettersson in order to make that happen. But now they might be looking for some additional help on that back end. Now that Pettersson's not there to log, the 18 to 20 minutes a game that he was playing. So obviously right now they're looking for an additional defenseman, and they very well might end up trading an additional forward out to make that happen. Now originally with Pittsburgh with Sprong, I really thought they would look to bring back another forward, but obviously they were more interested in a defenseman. So for Anaheim to get him, they obviously had to give up the D-man. But, ultimately, I do think the Ducks have at least one forward here that they'd be willing to trade out. They've obviously picked up some additional players throughout the year that they didn't start with. Obviously, Corey Perry's on long-term injury reserve here as well. Plus, you've got Patrick Eaves on IR still. And Nick Ritchie gets started late. So they've made some additional moves here throughout the year. But the one player that I think will eventually be moved by the Ducks likely is going to be Jacob Silfverberg. Now, Silfverberg's a pending unrestricted free agent. And I think with Anaheim's cap situation, unless they're able to potentially move out a bigger contract, and a lot of those bigger contracts that they have on their roster have no move clauses of some sort, then his contract might prove to be too costly for them to be able to retain. So I would not be shocked to see Silfverberg on the move sometime this season. Might also explain why the Anaheim Ducks have brought in some other younger forwards with less expensive contracts, like Daniel Sprong, like Aberg, guys like that. I mean, they have other younger forwards under contract that are a lot more reasonable as well. Like Nick Ritchie, Rickard Rakell, Andre Kasha, etc. Those guys could be a big part of their long-term future here if they continue to develop and be leaders on that team, because their contracts right now are much more affordable than some of the older veterans like Getzlaf, Perry, Kessler, etc. So I would most likely think Silfverberg might be the guy that has to come out in order to achieve bringing in that defenseman that they probably need in order to continue being active to potentially make the playoffs here. Now, leading into this season, I said the Ducks were a team I had a lot of concerns about, mainly due to the aging core and some injuries that were likely going to happen. So far they're kind of hanging on, but they could be a team to either drop down or potentially, sustain this effort here and make the playoffs. But I do think a large part of their effort for making the playoffs is going to be on the back of goaltender John Gibson. We'll see how far he can take them, but I think it's fair to say Gibson's their MVP this year and likely continues to be that for the rest of this season. Now, jumping over to take a look at the Carolina Hurricanes, they're in the market for a top 6 forward. Now, the Hurricanes are a team we discussed at great length before, especially during the William Nylander saga when he was not signed by the Toronto Maple Leafs. There was numerous reports out of Carolina that they were all in for Nylander. They were really wanting him on their roster and trying to figure out how they could make that happen. Well, of course, that did not happen. He's now signed and back a part of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And at this point, we don't have any reason to think that Nylander would be traded. Not anytime soon, at least. That's a story for another day by all means here. So I do think the Carolina Hurricanes definitely have to look elsewhere if they need to upgrade their scoring, and it's certainly something that they need to do if they have any hopes of being a playoff team or making a good push this season. Now, the Carolina Hurricanes have 3 goaltenders. Now, Scott Darling hasn't been working out. Obviously, he's been sent down to the minors. Curtis McElhinney has kind of taken over as the starter. You get Mrazek, but they do have 3 goalies there, so they do have a potential trade piece in that respect. And they also have tons of defensemen who can play at the NHL level. They have a good combination of left and right shot guys. So depending on what teams are looking for, might determine who they actually move out. If you take a look at the Carolina Hurricanes right side defensemen, you got Dougie Hamilton, you got Justin Falk, you got Brett Pesce, and Trevor Van Riemsdyk. On the left side, you got Jacob Slavin, Calvin DeHaan, Hayden Fleury, and then you got Jake Bean currently playing in the American Hockey League. So they've got a lot of defensemen who are capable. So obviously it's been rumored for some time that they would move at least one out. For the longest time, it was led to believe that it likely would be Justin Falk, but that's yet to happen. And at this point, it very well could still be Falk, but not necessarily. We see lots of speculation around a number of their defensemen. But considering they need scoring, they have an extra goaltender and lots of defensemen. That's likely the road they're going to go down here. Now, the Ducks and the Hurricanes, like I mentioned, could make good trade partners here. Obviously, the Ducks don't really need a goalie. Probably wouldn't have any interest in what they have in that regard. But one of their left shot defensemen would probably fit very well with the Ducks, and in exchange possibly for Jacob Silfverberg. Silfverberg certainly capable of playing top 6 minutes, likely a second line winger on a lot of teams across the NHL. Pretty solid 20-goal guy. And if you can get him on a line with some of those younger, exciting Carolina Hurricane forwards, then I certainly do think that he would fit well there. And they could certainly take a look at, potentially signing him for a reasonable contract extension. He's still young enough that I think he'd be attractive to the Hurricanes. And the contract really that he's going to be able to get as a free agent isn't going to be that outrageous. It's just the fact that the Ducks don't have a ton of space, so they might find it hard to keep him in the fold. But the Hurricanes would not, because they have a lot more space, and really with the defenseman going out would create even more. So I do think there's a lot of reasons to think the Ducks and Hurricanes very well could make good trade partners, but either way, even if they don't deal with each other, that's what they're each looking for. They both make a lot of sense. There's certainly some other players around the league and other teams they could look to make this happen. And as we've seen lately, there's been an awful lot of activity between trades and waivers and whatnot. So certainly I do expect these teams are not going to be waiting too long. If you take a look at the Eastern and Western Conference standings right now, the Eastern Conference especially is still pretty wide open for who can make the playoffs and who could not. I mean, if you take a look at the Atlantic, the top 3 is kind of starting to creep away a little bit. But there's still, you can't really say that there's any teams that are completely, out of it at all. You get any kind of a short winning streak, 3 or 4 games, you can be right back in the mix here. But in the Western Conference, there's certainly some teams that are starting to fall out of favor and might be getting too far behind, like the Kings and Blues, for example. So, there's certainly going to be, sooner than later, there's going to be a few teams kind of acknowledging that they're going to be sellers here and start to move some pieces. So I do expect that we could likely have more trade activity, I said earlier than normal this year, ahead of the deadline. But only time will tell if that's right or not. But we'll see what happens. Here. I would not be surprised to see at least a few more trades here before the roster freeze later this month before Christmas. So that is all your latest NHL trade rumors and news from the NHL Waiver Wire. So certainly leave your thoughts and comments down below, especially when it comes to the Ducks and the Hurricanes here. Do you think they make good trade partners, or who else should they potentially target here to satisfy what they're looking for to upgrade their rosters? If you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams. There's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. Please give this video a thumbs up before you go as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time. you.